Morning. You want on?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I see we have quite a few people already joining the meeting, so we can start. So I hope you can all see my screen now, yeah, so we can get started. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. And yeah, so welcome to this webinar, Overcoming Barriers to Scale Up Ecosystem-based Adaptation in Asia Pacific. We're really happy that you're all here. So my name is Anna Kilponen, and I am UNEP's Global Adaptation Network regional liaison for the Asia Pacific region. And today I'll be introducing the session, our speakers, and take you through a brief icebreaker session as well. So first, a little bit background on the webinar. So this webinar is part of a series of dialogues UNEP's Global Adaptation Network, or GAN for short, is organizing to support the Global Ecosystem-based Adaptation Fund, or Global EbA Fund. And we will hear about the fund in a little bit, more. So this fund is financed by Germany's International Climate Initiative, ICI, and it's co-implemented by IUCN and UNEP. And it aims to provide rapid and targeted support for innovative approaches to scale up ecosystem-based adaptation. And so to support the fund, GAN is holding regional dialogues to gather inputs from key stakeholders on each region on the main challenges to EbA uptake and upscaling. And so GAN has already organized 2 of these regional dialogues in Africa and in Latin America and the Caribbean. And today, IUCN and UNEP are organizing this Asia Pacific Regional Dialogue webinar to share a little bit more information about the fund, but also to discuss catalytic and innovative EbA approaches and gather examples and lessons or to overcome EbA barriers in the region with the focus on adaptation knowledge, governance, and financing. And the inputs we're gathering today in the interactive session will feed back into the fund and help shape and set priorities for the fund. And this session will also build on the discussions of the 7th APAN Forum that was organized last March, where IUCN and UNEP were co-leading the stream on nature-based resilience. So here is the agenda for today. And as you will see, we'll first have a brief icebreaker session followed by a presentation by UNEP's Nora Nguyen on the fund. After that, we will be hearing from Dr. Sunita Chaudhary on ICIMOD's work on overcoming barriers related to knowledge and understanding to scale up EbA. Then we will be hearing from Dr. Salimul Hook from ICCCAD, and he'll be discussing policy and governance challenges. And Dr. Suzanne Robertson from ADB will be presenting on finance. After that, my colleagues at IUCN will take the floor. First, Katie Bimson will facilitate the interactive session on Mural, during which we would like to hear from our audience on your experiences and your lessons learned on overcoming barriers to scale up EbA. And then we will hear closing remarks from Raphael Klebe. This agenda, along with the speaker profiles and links to the interactive sessions, is shared now in the chat by my colleague Sue. Thanks so much, Sue. So first, before I give the floor to our speakers, we're going to do a little bit of a warm-up exercise so that you get used to the Mural platform, and then so that we also get to know each other a little bit. So what I would ask you to do is to go on the link that is being shared now in the chat. Sue is dropping a link in the chat, I hope. And if you follow that link, the link icebreaker, where are you joining us from, that is now on the chat. So if you click that open, the link will take you to the Mural board where you see a world map. And on the map, we would ask you to zoom in into the where you are located right now. And by double clicking the map, drop a sticky note on your location. And then it would be also great if you could write your the city and the country where you are right now on that sticky note. So I will show that now on my screen as well. So this is the view that you should be seeing on your screen when you follow that link. And I see that we already have several participants dropping their sticky notes on the map. So I'm just going to demonstrate really briefly how to do it. So you would essentially scroll into the map, and then by double clicking, drop a sticky note. And then I would write the city and country on that sticky note, and that's it. If you click on the sticky note, you can also change the size and drag it to move it. And if you click on the right on your mouse, you can also delete your sticky note if you want. So let me just zoom out a little bit. I can see we have quite a few colleagues joining from Asia Pacific region. Lots of participants in Southeast Asia. I see someone also from India. And then we also have colleagues joining from Africa and Europe. Not too many colleagues from North America and South America, but I think that's perhaps explained by the time difference. So it's really interesting to see participants, hovering around the map and dropping your sticky notes. So please continue to do that. The link is in the chat. So if you're joining us just now, just go to the link and it will take you to this world map where you can drop the sticky notes on your location. So I'm now going to go back to the agenda. But please feel free to keep dropping the sticky notes on the map. We will be looking at it after the session. So thanks so much for everybody for your participation. In the chat, we will also now be adding another link to another Mural board. So that link will take you to the Mural board that is the main exercise at the end of this webinar. So if you click that Mural board, Overcoming Barriers to Scale Up Ecosystem-based Adaptation in Asia Pacific, that Sue just dropped on the chat. So you can click that link already and start exploring. We will dive into that a bit more in depth towards the end of our webinar. And you can start exploring and providing your inputs if you like. But as I said, we'll be looking at that a bit more on the interactive section at the end. So on today's webinar, we're going to be hearing 4 presentations. First, we will have Ms. Nora Nguyen, who's working with UNEP managing the Global EbA Fund. And Nora has worked over the past 7 years in the field of dryland management and climate change resilience in the drylands of Africa and Southeast Asia. She holds a master's degree in environmental management and development from the Australian National University. And Nora will be providing an introduction to the Global EbA Fund. Then after Nora, we will be giving the floor to our 3 speakers who will each be focusing on one of the key EbA barriers that this webinar is focusing on, which are lack of knowledge and understanding, governance and policy challenges, and limited access to finance to scale up EbA. So the first presentation, delivered by Dr. Sunita Chowdhury, will focus on the knowledge and understanding barrier. And Sunita works as an ecosystem services specialist at the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, where she's responsible for research, policy inputs, capacity building, and advocacy of evidence-based policy for conservation and sustainable development of Hindu Kush Himalaya. And she has almost a decade of experience on natural resource management in Australia, Austria, Cambodia, and Hindu Kush Himalayan region. After Sunita, Dr. Salim Ul-Hook will be presenting on governance and policy challenges. And Salim is the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICCCAD, and professor at the Independent University, Bangladesh. He's also the chair of the expert advisory group for the Climate Vulnerable Forum and senior advisor on locally led adaptation with Global Center on Adaptation. Salim has been a lead author for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th assessment reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and he also advises the Least Developed Countries Group in the UNFCCC. Our final presentation, focusing on the finance barrier, will be delivered by Dr. Suzanne Robertson, who is the Principal Environment Specialist with the Asian Development Bank. And Suzanne is really leading the program on nature-positive investments, aiming to introduce and increase awareness about nature-positive investment approaches and build the institutional settings needed to increase investments in nature. So welcome to all our speakers, and thank you for joining us today. For more information about our speakers, please take a look at that document we've dropped in the chat earlier. I also want to briefly introduce the organizing team. So as I mentioned, my name is Anna Kilponen, and I'm the regional liaison for GAN for Asia Pacific region. And in this role, I support GAN and the regional node Asia Pacific Adaptation Network, APAN, with regional initiatives and the APAN Forum. And I also support communications and help capture and share lessons from the region on ecosystem-based adaptation for the Global EbA Fund. Next, I would like to introduce Katie Bimson, who will be taking us through the interactive part of this webinar on Mural. Katie is the program officer for water and wetlands at the IUCN Asia Regional Office. She has 8 years of experience working on wetlands in Southeast Asia, and she's currently supporting the regional implementation of the Mekong Wet project in Cambodia, Lao PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam. She also supports the Secretariat for the Indo-Burma Ramsar Regional Initiative, working closely with the governments in the region to strengthen the implementation of the Ramsar Convention. Finally, I would also like to introduce Raphael Clemé, who is the Senior Program Officer for Water and Wetlands at the IUCN Asia Regional Office. And he's also the regional focal point for nature-based solutions, the UNFCCC and the Ramsar Convention. Raphael has 14 years of experience working on environmental conservation with governments, international NGOs, intergovernmental organizations, covering a range of topics, including water and transboundary rivers governance, wetland management, coastal ecosystems and fisheries, and nature-based solutions for adaptation and water security. And Raphael will be delivering the closing remarks at the end of this webinar. So now we're going to move on with our speakers, and I will give the floor first to Nora to introduce the fund. Nora, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us today. I'm really delighted to be joining this dialogue on overcoming barriers to scaling up EbA in Asia and the Pacific. So as Anna has said, my name is Nora Nyen, and I'm currently managing the Global EbA Fund with UNEP in close collaboration with IUCN. It truly is my pleasure to introduce the Global EbA Fund to you today. So what is the Global EbA Fund? This fund is a quickly deployable mechanism to set up to support innovative approaches to EbA with an aim of helping people to adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. The fund was designed to support scaling up of EbA across the world and to encourage catalytic and innovative initiatives that help to overcome these barriers that we're going to discuss today. So we welcome you to visit the Global EbA Fund that my colleague Sue will kindly share in the chat for more information as I talk through more information on the fund. Next slide, please. So the Global EbA Fund is implemented jointly by IUCN and UNEP and funded by the Federal Environment Ministry of Germany, BMU, through its International Climate Initiative. The fund draws on and supports the various momentums behind nature-based solutions and EbA, trying to build synergies and with other upscaling initiatives. So global networks such as UNEP's GAN, the Global Adaptation Network, which is organizing this meeting today, and IUCN's Friends of Ecosystem-based Adaptation, FEBA, as examples of networks that we're leveraging on, growing on this growing momentum of NBS, which is nature-based solutions, and EbA, and hoping to connect to the ever-growing community of practice within the field of EbA. So in particular, this fund was actually designed and drew upon various other funds, such as Biopharma, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, as well as SOS. So this used other funds to design it, in building on solutions, building on lessons, building on lessons learned previously. Next slide, please. So maybe to give context to the discussion today, we'll provide the definition that we use. The Global EbA Fund uses the CBD, or the Convention on Biodiversity definition on EbA. EbA here is defined as the use of biodiversity and ecosystem services as part of the overall adaptation strategy to help people to adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. So ecosystem-based adaptation, as you all know, is one type of nature-based solutions, the nature-based solutions are locally appropriate actions that address challenges such as climate change and provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits by protecting and sustainably managing as well as restoring ecosystems. Next slide, please. So the Global EbA Fund supports projects that contribute to the implementation of EbA to climate change and align with the FEBA FEBA was a Friends of EbA, qualifications, criteria, and quality standards. These 7 constraints are summarized here, and some of them include governance and institutional constraints, vulnerability of women and girls to climate change, social and cultural barriers. All this information I think you can read more about from the FEBA website, and also on the Global EbA Fund website on how this has been applied to the various to the application criteria for the fund. Next slide, please. So what is the purpose of the fund? So as mentioned, the BMU through ICI has committed 20 million euros to the Global EbA Fund. This fund will provide rapid and targeted financing support to innovative and catalytic projects in order to address specific gaps in policy, technical knowledge, and to maximize the impact of the very vital nature-based solutions at a global scale. So the EbA Fund is guided by 3 broad objectives, which are summarized here, and which also align with the Global Commission on Adaptation defined barriers to EbA, which also provides, which we're going to be discussing today, and which the panelists will engage on a little further. So next slide, please, sorry. A bit of information on what we fund. So the Global EbA Fund provides grants between $50,000 and $250,000 for a maximum of 36 months. These projects are required to be complementary and add value to existing work by either filling in a gap in an existing project, enhancing the impact of EbA investments, contributing to policy, for example, upscaling of EbA, as well as could also be used to develop a larger proposal to other funding mechanisms. So the project or this fund also prioritizes applicants who are well grounded in the proposed area of work, who have expertise and experience in the size and type of project that they're proposing, as well as are inclusive or have an inclusive element of local communities, indigenous knowledge, and gender perspectives. So the projects may have either global, thematic, or regional and country-specific focus. However, all the countries that are in the targeted have to be ODA eligible, and these details are provided in the Global EbA Fund website that has been shared. So we encourage applications from a range of applicants, ranging from local NGOs, community-based organizations, research organizations, think tanks, private sector, among others. And these actually fall in the category of both traditional as well as non-traditional actors within the EbA sector. However, important to note is UNEP and IUCN offices are currently not eligible to apply for the fund. This is in line with the ICI policies that these funds are also not provided to government partners. However, organizations working with national to local governments may be able to apply to the fund. These details are also provided on our website under the subpage what we fund. You can learn more about this. So in the next slide, next slide, please. In the next slide, just information on how to apply for the fund. So the Global EbA Fund accepts and reviews concept stage application packages. So this is, you put in a concept note that is reviewed, and based on that, all these are shortlisted, and the decisions to these funds are actually made at a biannual basis. So the first fund was, the first cutoff was April of this year, and the second cutoff that is coming up will be in September, 15th of September 2021. Applications are received on a rolling basis. So if you're not able to meet the current deadline that's coming up, you would be considered in the next round. So successful applicants are invited afterwards to submit a full proposal stage, which includes due diligence. The due diligence process is undertaken. This takes about 6 weeks to be done. If you want to have more information on how to apply, my colleague will drop a link in the chat box for more information. So just to let you know that in the next slide, please. just to let you know that we have actually received the first round of applications, which resulted in over 275 applicants submitting the applications from over 75 countries. So this diverse range of applicants and applications resulted in a number that have now been invited to submit the full proposals. We anticipate that the demand and the diversity of the fund or applicants to the fund will increase over time, and we encourage you all to apply or to share information to potential applicants before the next cutoff, which is 15th of September of this year. Next slide, please. So just a little bit snapshot of what we have been doing over the past year. So one of the activities that's currently being undertaken is a desktop study on the various barriers to EbA, which will be compiled into an analytical paper that should be produced by the beginning of next year. So this analytical paper will be enriched by the dialogues and the survey, which I'll talk to a little bit further, where we collect a broad and diverse information across the world from the different regions, capturing the various barriers faced by communities and countries in implementing EbA. Another activity that we're currently undertaking is the regional dialogue, which includes this one that we're attending today. These regional events have been held between June and now. August. This has been the latest one organized across the different regions, so Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America and the Caribbean, organized by the GAN Secretariat and facilitated by our regional liaison officers, including Anna, who kindly invited and introduced all of us at the webinar. So these dialogues are used to collect information as well, which are region-specific and examples of innovative and catalytic solutions which are being implemented across the regions. Finally, we are currently holding a survey in support of the Global EbA Fund. This platform was designed for adaptation experts, practitioners, and all other people who are implementing EbA in order to share or capture the various case studies and evidence of successes, benefits, and lessons learned on the implementation of EbA. The survey is available, and the link will be dropped here by my colleague, and is open until the end of October of this year. So we invite you all to participate in the survey, and which would help us to gather really valuable information about your country, about your region, and the various EbA activities that you are currently undertaking. And in my final slide, next slide, please. So these three barriers I think you have seen in the invitation. So these are the barriers defined by the Global Commission on Adaptation, and they'll provide the context for our discussion today. These three, as you can tell, also overlay or overlap with the objectives of our fund. And these are, just to mention them in further detail: one, lack of awareness of the critical role of natural assets in underpinning resilience and the limited availability of knowledge and evidence to help make a case for working with nature. The second one is policy and regulatory environments and governance challenges that influence the attractiveness and feasibility of using these approaches. And lastly, limited access to finance for applying and scaling up nature-based approaches. So I look forward to the discussion and the suggestions of examples of innovative and catalytic solutions that are going to come up today, considering that Asia Pacific is such a diverse and ecologically rich region of the world. And so I look forward to the discussions as well as the interactive session that's going to be happening later. Thank you very much, and over to you, Anna.
Thanks so much, Nora, for this great introduction to the fund. So if you have any questions, if our audience has any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. We've received already some questions and comments. So we'll be taking some of these questions at the end of the session. If you have any specific questions for a specific speaker, please also let us know, address those questions. And like I said, we will be doing the Q&A as a part of the interactive session at the end. So now we're going to give the floor to our three speakers, who will each be discussing a specific EbA barrier. I would now like to invite Sunita from ICIMOD to discuss the barrier focusing on lack of knowledge and understanding to scale up EbA. So Sunita, over to you.
Thank you, Anna, so much. And thank you also, Nora, for giving a good foundation of how to scale up the EbA. I think that is already a way forward for many of us. So as already discussed, like I'll be focusing on one of the barriers, that how to overcome barriers related to the lack of knowledge and understanding. But before that, next slide, please. So before going to discuss about how we can overcome the barriers, I would just like to discuss about what are the major issues, what are the challenges that relates to the lack of understanding and also awareness about the EbA. So based on the learnings and understanding from the region, we can say that the EbA, the ecosystem-based adaptation word, is often used as buzzword, whether it is related to the financing mechanism because people want to use the project funding, or whether it is just a fashion word. So EbA has been also reflected in many of the literatures that the EbA has been sometimes used as buzzword, not only by the researchers, but also the practitioners and the policymakers, and also the other sectors which are using this word as a buzzword without necessarily understanding what the EbA really means and what it is aiming to address the challenges in the region and beyond. And also because, as we see, there are so many concepts coming on. So EbA, it was already in discussion in 2020, well before the CBD really had a good definition in 2010 and 2009. But it's already been like 2 decades, but over the last 2 decades, we have so many concepts, EbA, and also recently we are coming with the nature-based solution. So stakeholders are sometimes confused whether EbA is related to the NBS or whether NBS is related to EbA, or whether these are EBAs and NBS are same. So there are a lot of confusions among the different kind of stakeholders about the use and the understanding of EBAs and NBS. And at the same time, other concepts like ecosystem services, like PES, and so many other concepts which are there for us to use and apply, but there are no clarity and no boundary between all these concepts. So that creates a lot of confusion between the concepts. The other one I was trying to highlight and discuss about the varied and often tailored understanding and the perception about the different EbA's definitions. So if we see in the academia, in the science, the EbA is theoretically understood as a little bit differently than the people, the stakeholders understand at the policy level and also at the practice level. And this understanding is also very varied and tailored across the scale. At the global scale, it is different. We follow the CBD definition. We also follow others. But when it comes to at the national and the local scale, people perceive the understanding of EbA differently. And that's where there are gaps across the scale in the understanding of EbA. And of course, the other one is the undervalued and often marginalized the value of nature. So whenever we talk about like any adaptation, any other projects, the natures are taken for granted. We do not, because we are getting the services from the nature for free for generations. And also if only certain ecosystem services are valued, just for instance, water, because we see water values, but other nature services like cultural services, social services, and also different habitat and supporting services are not reflected in the policy and also at the practice levels. So that's why the concept of ecosystem really emerged during 1980s to make the people understand that we need to value nature and which are the foundation for us to go ahead and develop and also save our overall well-being. The other one I think is very limited recent and often sectoral. So whenever we do research, we are only focusing on one aspect. Like for instance, there are different sectors, but they are not integrated. We say that we need to be cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary, but when it comes to practice, we want to be in the safe zone and we want to work in our sector where we have our expertise. We are afraid to go beyond our safe zone. So, and the research are often very limited in one sector or one specific issues and do not focus on cross-disciplinary and multidisciplinary issues where nature is often marginalized even in the research. And other one is the sectoral, as already said, and often very scattered. If you see in the region, very limited research, because I did a very systematic literature review in the region, and you can hardly find like EBA literatures focused on EBA, specific EBA literature from the region, not even 100 literatures in the region. So this means that they are focusing the literature and or even the science is very scattered, and even there is research, it's very sectoral. And also the lack of mainstreaming, not into only policy, but also in the practice, which will be, I think, highlighted in the later, in the another talk. So I'll just focus on these key issues and barriers are the major constraints for us, which really contributes the lack of understanding and knowledge about the EVA. Next slide, please. So based on this, based on the practice and also learnings from the region, what I would like to say that really we need to have long-term research, not only in the region, but across the globe, and it should be very highly networked, and the communication of the research is also a major gap. Like there are a lot of the data issues. So even we have some good research, long-term research in place, but we are hesitant to share our data in the public. Even if in the public there, we do not have very detailed information where we can use. Only certain sectors can use, and which is not public. So we really need to focus on research, not only on the long term, but also the short term, depending on the issues and the context. The other one is the valuing and integrating the plural values of nature. For instance, now we are focusing a lot on the economic values of nature, which is very true because this is one of the foundation for us to aware about the public, about the values of nature, and also to the policymakers. But what about the sacred values? What about the cultural values of nature, which are there, which are the base of our foundation of our human existence since millennium? So those values, the pluralism of natures, are not well reflected in EBA or in any other concept. So also in the science policy and practice. So we really need to focus on these aspects and highlight the values and integration into our policy and practice. And also the other one is the human as a part of nature. So often we think there are sectoral perception, like people often think that we are above the nature itself. So that's why we can live in harmony with nature, and CBD has already been in the process of having 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. So I think we need to start from now and consider ourselves as a part of nature, and we respect each other and live together peacefully and also develop each other. The other one I really found interesting and also effective is the sharing of good practices. If I really talk about from this region, there are like the Asia Pacific region is extremely rich, and in the Hindu Coast Himalaya is extremely lives in the good practices. We have so many traditional practices, knowledge, but there are limitations in the sharing of these good practices. Sometimes it is only limited in the white paper, but not really replicated or scaling up in the other regions or within the region. So the other point I want to highlight is the learnings from pilot EBAs. So we already have UNEP and IUCN have already piloted a lot of projects in the region and across the globe. So in this region, in the Hindu Coast Himalaya, we have mountain EBA and so many others EBAs. So I think it's now for us time to learn from those pilot projects and what are the good learnings we can scale up, we can replicate. So I think we really need to focus on those learnings. The other one is like PACE incentive for ecosystem services, which are there since like last 2 decades, but we are struggling to implement those on the ground because people often already talk like people often do not value nature, and then they do not want to pay for the nature except like few specific services like water or maybe some physical provisioning services. So we really need to focus on incentive for ecosystem services and mainstream into policy and practice. So some good examples I can show you, like the TEEB, we already have biofilm started at the regional scale, but we can also think of something at the local and also national scale and making a network and sharing of experience and implementing and replicating those. So next one, please. So I wanted to highlight how important is our traditional knowledge system and how we can integrate those traditional knowledge system into the modern technologies. For instance, I want to give example of the water mills in Nepal. So they are there since many decades, like over like 100 years, which were there used for grinding only. But now the communities in the mountain areas are using these, the water mills as to generate the small scale electricity, which is not only lightening up the small villages, but they are using it also for irrigation, but also grinding their agricultural products. So this water mill has been a multi-purpose initiative, not only in the Nepal, but also in Bangladesh and other regions. The other one I really want to give example is the eco-safe roads, because Nepal and this region are highly susceptible and vulnerable to different kinds of disaster, including landslides, floods, and also the development is one of the major reasons. So we want to construct the road everywhere because we want development, because road is seen as the one of the prime indicator of the development. But without any, without thinking about the nature, we just want a road. We just want access to market, to development. We also need to focus on environment. What are its impacts, including the environmental impacts as they are in place. But we can promote the traditional knowledge into this. We can have the bioengineering, we can have the safe roads to control the landslides and also the floods, but also we can promote the development, especially in the mountain context where road is really a problem in the region. The other one is the bamboo houses. Like we already got good lessons, especially from Nepal and the region, that the concrete houses are not very compatible and can have a very high impact on people's life. That's why the traditional bamboo houses, which are earthquake resilient, which are traditional, but at the same time, which can be promoted in the region so that we can be earthquake resistant and save many lives of people in the city, but also in the rural areas. Next one, please. So other one I wanted to highlight about the CB Fuse, which is very famous in the region. ICIMOD is applying CB Fuse, community-based early warning system in the region at the local scale, but also at the national scale. So whenever we are predicting some floods up in upstream, so we are providing the early warning downstream. And this is completely community-based. So ICIMOD provides the technical support in the setup, but later on it is handed over to the community, and they are, and the benefits are already, there are so much that this specific concept and practice has been replicated across Nepal and in so many countries in the region, in Bangladesh and beyond the region, also in Africa. The other one is landslide early warning system is the same thing. So we also want the, especially in the rural areas, about the to the villages, about the landslides, so that they have the time to escape from the landslides. The other one is the use of mobile technology. So nowadays, mobile is with everyone, with every household. So mobile technology can be used to reduce the human-wildlife conflict, because there are so many examples in India also. Whenever we see elephants, we can say that the elephant is in this region, so that the villagers and the people are aware of that of the elephants, and they just go away from that area. And also the climate services for agriculture is also becoming very famous in the region, where the farmers have access to the information on when the rainfall will be coming, when the hailstorm will be coming, so that they can protect their agriculture. Next one. So I'll just briefly say about how we can diversify the evidence base. I think the experiential learnings is one way to do this, and we already have this north-north, south-south, north-south learnings from each other. So I think we need to promote more on this within the Asia Pacific region. Maybe like India can learn with other countries, Nepal can learn with Pakistan, or maybe one of the countries from Asia Pacific learn from other Southeast Asian countries. So I think this needs to be promoted and integrated. And also, we often complain about the vertical and the horizontal lack of collaboration between across the sector and also across the government agencies. So I think we need to have the vertical horizontal, but beside vertical horizontal, we also need to have the diagonal collaboration among the sectors, but also in the right
There's Sunita. Sorry to interrupt you. I think your audio is not so good at the moment. Perhaps if you switch off your video, it will improve a little bit. Sunita, can you hear me? Sunita, we cannot hear you, and it seems that your video has also stopped. Sunita, I think we lost a connection with you. We cannot hear you anymore. So perhaps I'm conscious of the time, so perhaps we can jump now, since Sunita doesn't seem to be online anymore. We can jump to.
Sorry, Anna. I think my internet got stuck.
Oh yes, Sunita, now I can hear you. Great if you can just briefly summarize your presentation, and then we can jump into Salim's intervention. We're running a little bit late, so thanks so much.
Yeah. So I think I was just talking about the science policy interface, which is at the global scale already happening with the IPBES, but it has to be, I think we also need to think about that at the regional scale, where we can have a regional IPBES, like a specific IPBES on EbA or specific sectors. And also the context and specificities, like for coastal areas, the EbA can be different. For mountain areas, EbA can be different. But we need to focus on these specificities. And also we need to show the cost and benefit analysis. Whenever we talk about any project, the people start to ask what is the viability of the project, what are the benefits and costs. So we need to focus on this. Next slide, please. So yes, I think, yes. So these are some of the learnings from the regions, and I already see a lot of questions in the chat box, so I'm happy to respond during Q&A. Back to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sunita, for that presentation, and yeah, highlighting some of the examples of the technologies we can use for adaptation, and the importance of integrating traditional knowledge into adaptation. So thanks so much. I'm now going to hand over to Salim to discuss about the governance challenges. So Salim, over to you for your 10 minutes intervention. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Anna. And thank you, Sunita, for an excellent presentation. It was very useful and informative, and I'll build on that. Let me also apologize for not having a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to share some thoughts with you on the arena of barriers in the policy and governance space. And I'm going to share three areas of things that I think we need to be aware of and then address as we go forward. And my focus is at the national scale. National governments are now having to deal with climate change. With the IPCC 6th assessment report, which has just come out, it has now become absolutely unequivocal that we have entered into a climate change era. It is happening. It's happening everywhere. Nowhere is going to escape. And so every planning exercise going forward, every investment going forward must take climate change into account. And in order to take climate change into account effectively, we need to have cognizance of nature and take nature-based solutions as the way forward. Now, in that context, as Sunita has already raised, there is an issue about buzzwords and new terminology that are not always familiar to everybody else. And EbA, ecosystem-based adaptation, is one of those buzzwords. And so, in my view, the biggest barrier at the national decision-making level is that some people are familiar, but the main decision makers are not. And so the onus is on those of us, and I count myself in that community, who have been involved in either climate change adaptation or on nature-based solutions or in working on ecosystems. We need to reach out to higher level decision makers in ministries of finance, ministries of planning, the prime minister and the president's office. They need to understand this because they are the ones spending the main budgets that they are doing. They are interested in doing development, but as Sunita pointed out, they are not always aware that development can be pro-nature or anti-nature. And very often it is anti-nature rather than pro-nature. So how do we get that message to them? And it is very largely an issue of communications. We too often, in my view, talk to ourselves. So amongst ourselves, we all understand, we support each other, but we are not decision makers. We don't control the billions of dollars that are being spent by national decision makers, let alone many more billions by international and global decision makers. So we need to target them. So I would say, first of all, the barrier is communications, understanding. We need to target and get that level of understanding to these higher level decision makers. Not only a higher level, but the higher level is a priority, but then also at the lower level, people working on the ground, farmers, fishers, people on the ground for whom it is not so much that they don't understand, they have a experiential knowledge, but we need to provide them with sort of the modern knowledge, if you like, or the scientific knowledge and the scientific terminology, which may be something that is not familiar to them, although the actions may be familiar to them. So communications is a key. Just doing research is not good enough. Research has to be communicated. And when you want to be effective in communications, you have to have a target for your communications. A scattergun approach is not useful. Sending, hoping you write something and anybody can understand it, they can't. You have to write it for a particular audience. And sometimes writing isn't even good enough, or the language you use has to be the language of people themselves, not in English or in French. And sometimes even writing is not good enough. You have to do visuals, videos, etc. So communications, more effective communications to spread the message, to raise the level of awareness. And then beyond the initial awareness raising, which I would say in many cases has been achieved, and I can certainly speak about my country, Bangladesh, where policymakers now understand it. It's not initially they didn't, now they do. So now they have moved to asking, okay, so what do we do? You have to show us what to do. And this is where we have to show them. This is where pilot projects come in handy, as Sunitha has just mentioned. We need to bring pilot projects that have been successful to the attention of decision makers. And my own personal opinion, and this is my advice, if you like, to the funding agencies who are going to be disbursing these funds, is that rather than fund new pilot projects, given the scale of the problem, I would say a prioritization on scaling up successful pilots should be the way to go. Scaling up can be two ways of scaling up. It can be going bigger. So horizontal scaling, if you've done something in a small area of, let's say, 10,000 hectares, can you take it to 100,000 hectares or a bigger area, in getting more people and more places involved? And then there's a vertical scaling up, which is take your pilot project to the policymaker and get the policymaker to say, yes, this pilot is a very good one. Now we are going to implement it everywhere. The whole country will have to now use this EbA approach or this nature-based solution approach or whatever it is that the message, the main learning message is from the pilot is. So you have to sell the pilot and its utility and usefulness to the decision makers, policy makers, so that they are convinced to then make it into national policy. Once it's in national policy, then obviously we will have to see how it can be implemented. They will need help. There will be a lot of scope for capacity building, but at least in principle, they will have agreed to do it. Right now, most of them have not done that. They are still at the level of maybe level of awareness raising, level of saying, yes, we want to do it, but we really don't know what to do. So it's a very important for us to focus on that, because as I said, time is running out. Time is not on our side. So we have to go for what is most effective and not just do more of the same in terms of a nice little pilot here and a nice little pilot there. The time for doing nice little pilots, in my view, is almost over. Time is running out on us. So let us go for what can be most effective in breaking these barriers and overcoming these barriers and convincing decision makers what needs to be done, and then showing them how it can be done and enabling and capacitating them on how it can be done. Which brings me to my third and final area of discussion, which is where I am placed. I work on climate change. I work on adaptation to climate change. I work on what used to be called community-based adaptation to climate change. I've been doing that for the last 20 years in vulnerable developing countries like Bangladesh and in Asia, also in Africa and the least developed countries. And we have a growing community of practice on community-based adaptation. And in this community-based adaptation growing area of practice, we have very much taken on board ecosystem-based adaptation. So CBA, or community-based adaptation, together with EbA, ecosystem-based adaptation, is now very much mainstreamed into this bottom-up community of practice that we already have. And so we need to strengthen and build on taking their message, as I said, both replicating and expanding it horizontally, many more places, and vertically to higher level decision makers, both at the national level as well as at the global level, including, let us say, regional, multilateral regional banks like the Asian Development Bank in our region, the World Bank at the global region, and other multilateral banks in other regions as well. They are the ones with the big money. They're spending it on big development. They have not really done it very well in the past with respect to nature and ecology. So they accept that. So that's a good sign. They want to do it. So we need to help them to do that. So to me, that's a huge opportunity that we can take forward. Speaking again on behalf of my research community, namely the locally led adaptation. We now call it locally led adaptation, which incorporates both CBA and EbA. We used to use CBA, EbA as separate terms. We are now putting them together in locally led adaptation. And this is now a growing area of interest. It is based on recognizing local capacities, knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and incorporating them into top-down planning so that top-down planning can be better, much more improved, and in particular, be nature sensitive and nature positive going forward. That has been the biggest lacuna in the past. We have been not only not nature positive, they have been nature negative. We have been destroying nature to our own detriment. So I look forward to engaging further with partners in this. The Global Adaptation Network, we are very much part of that. The Asia Pacific Adaptation Network is very much a very strong regional network within the global network. And I think this is a very good synergy between those of us who work on adaptation to climate change and those who work on biodiversity and ecosystems to bring the two together. They have to be together. They cannot be done separately anymore. And the more we can bring that into fruition and practice, the better and the faster we can do it. My last point is speed is of the essence. We don't have time to waste anymore. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Salim. Thank you for your sharing your thoughts and really like highlighting the urgency in breaking these barriers to scale up EbA. I'm now going to start sharing my screen again and invite Suzanne to start her presentation. Suzanne, over to you. So please stay within 10 minutes. We're running a little bit late, so we look forward to hear your presentation. So over to you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Anna. And on behalf of the Nature-Based Solutions Working Group of ADB, it's great to be here today. Thanks to everyone for joining from wherever you may be. And also a thank you to Samita and Samil, who have given us a lot of good insight already this morning in terms of some of the barriers that we're facing. So my role now is really to look at the financial aspect, and what better way to do that from a multilateral development bank. So what I would like to do is to discuss a little bit on the barriers, but more today to give you some examples of what ADB is doing. So next slide, please, Anna. Okay, so the first question that I was tasked with was really to look at how can equitable and flexible adaptation finance be strengthened. And I would like to give some examples on what ADB is actually doing at this time to overcome some of those issues. So one of the first aspects that we talk about when we're discussing finance is always the need to increase the financial flows. And while increasing the pool is always an important first step in terms of bridging that gap, we need to go beyond that to not only make finance available, but to make sure that the finance that is there to ensure that the available finance is effectively and efficiently used. And we also need to be able to monitor that so that we can make sure that we're achieving the impact and having the desired result that we want to be having with that level of finance. Now, UNEP came out with an interesting report saying that $8.1 trillion will be needed for investing in nature, climate change, biodiversity, and to meet our land degradation targets going up to 2050. Increase our investments fourfold a year. So the question is, how do we do that and how do we do it effectively? I think to meet this demand, we need to look at all the sources of financing that we can access. So that'll include access to public and private financing, bringing in new investors, and finding ways that we can actually use that finance more effectively and efficiently. So from the private side, one of the things that we need to do to get them on board is to look at mitigating risk more and increasing incentives for innovation, as well as pursuing some of the market-based instruments that we have out there, because these will be key in terms of driving changes in investment patterns, and that's what we need to see coming forward. From the public side, we need to think about how we can use the resources that they have available more efficiently and effectively. Domestic resource mobilization has a role to play here, rethinking the way that we're using taxes, reinforcing or refocusing the way that we have subsidies currently applied. That can fill some of the financing gap, but at the same time, by refocusing some of those, we'll also be able to reduce some of the drivers of degradation for which we're trying to address. So we can be smarter on both sides. And then there's the banker and investor perspective. So we need to work on strengthening risk management, blended finance mechanisms, diversified financial products, so that we can make it easier to access the finance that we have available. But at the same time, we need to look at ways that we can support development of innovative technical solutions, data and transparency mechanisms, as well as a set of standards, metrics, and methodologies for us to be able to screen and assess our operations so that we can better align our investment portfolio for where we would like to see the money going in the future that can deliver co-benefits for nature, climate change, and people. Now, from a multilateral development bank perspective and from a bank like ADB, we have an important role for how we can lead some of these transitions. And ADB coming up will be committing $9 billion in adaptation and resilience going up to 2024. So using the finance that we're going to be having, ADB has a significant role for how we can use and leverage that resource. So ADB concessional finance, we need to be able to push for technological and managerial advancements from our government partners. We have money, we can use that to incentivize change. And we need to be able to use that money as well to pull in private sector funding and efficiencies through domestic resource mobilization into a new type of project that puts nature at the forefront. So while we're committed to investing in adaptation and resilience and putting money on the table, we're also interested to see how we can strengthen the enabling conditions so we can use that financing more effectively. Okay, with my second question, and next slide, please, Anna. I would like to showcase a little in terms of what ADB is doing and how we can achieve that. And I would like to thank our previous speakers, Samita and Samil, who have really outlined some of the key constraints and mentioned the issues that we're trying to address in terms of the new initiative we have, which is the Regional Natural Capital Lab. So the lab aims to overcome a lot of the barriers that were discussed already by putting in place the required awareness, understanding, and capacity needed for informed decision-making to synergize investment priorities and policies with long-term development planning and investment strategies. So with this lab, we're looking at bringing a lot of the elements together where it's not only about the finance, but how we can put all the pieces together so that we can make the finance we have more effective and efficient. So the lab is working on 4 key areas, and the first one is around, excuse me, enhancing understanding and methods to value natural capital. And this was already mentioned by Samita, but if we can measure, understand, and account for the value of nature and its services, we are better served to know how to use, restore, and conserve, and how it can be better served to protect the well-being, livelihoods, as well as adapt and mitigate to climate change. So, valuing natural capital, we see this as an important part of informed decision-making where we can influence what investments and where investments are going forward. And we see that as the important first step for how we can help our member countries to move forward with this type of initiatives. But investment pipelines don't work in isolation, and to make those effective, we really also need to be looking at what is the second activity under the lab, and that's putting in place the policies, institutional governance, and regulatory frameworks that will allow the investment strategies that we have to be more effective. The third element in terms of finance is important, putting finance on the table, but it's also the mechanisms and products that we have related to that which are important. And the fourth element of the Natural Capital Lab, I think, is one of the most important and something already discussed today. So this is the glue that brings all of these elements together. And putting in place the knowledge, capacities, and partnerships to ensure that the first 3 actions we have, the finance, the policies, and the investment strategies, are actually going in the right direction is going to be important. And we regard partnerships as one of the most important things. There is not one agency here who can find a solution to everything. So partnerships in bringing together the knowledge providers, the financiers, and the solution providers, we think will be important along with our government partners. So the Natural Capital Lab is a very forward-looking activity in terms of we're looking at the future pipeline and the long-term planning and how we can influence that. But with my last question, and next slide, please, I would like to look at something which is a little bit more immediate, because as mentioned already today, we don't have time to waste and we need to act now. So this is an example that we have from ADB, which ADB is doing in cooperation with ASEAN. And this is something that we're working on, which has a very direct impact that is working at this time. So the facility was set up to push and mainstream green finance into infrastructure financing in Asia and Pacific. It was very much focused in terms of bridging that gap of what is the demand for finance. But in addition to that, we've been able to add a more important element in terms of how we can direct the finance that is moving forward. And that's about putting performance and policy conditionalities to the finance that we have in place. So through that, we've not only been able to make the investment that is needed, but we've also been able to put in place the green elements that we would like to see in those projects so that we can have more nature-based solutions and ecosystem approaches coming forward. So overall, we see that on a win-win basis. So you can have infrastructure development, which is creating jobs and supporting a brighter future. But at the same time, those types of projects are being transformed from traditional linear investments into something which is greener and includes adaptation as well as nature-based solutions. And thank you. Last slide, please. And if I can leave you with one concluding comment. You know, from a financial perspective, we very much see that access to finance and having finance available is very important. But in addition to that, what is really important is how we use that money and, excuse me, how we can make sure that we're able to monitor and measure the impact from that as well. And that is something that needs to be done collectively with all of us working together. Thank you, Anna. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Suzanne, for your presentation and sharing these examples on how to accelerate and diversify investments to scale up EbA. And then once again, thanks to all speakers for your presentations. Now we're going to move to the interactive section. So I'm going to give the floor to my colleagues at IUCN, Katie. First to Katie to introduce Mural and facilitate the interactive section of the webinar, and after to Raphael to close the webinar. So we will be sharing a link to the Mural board in the chat now. So please feel free to go ahead and click on that link to go to the Mural board. Yeah, I'm going to hand it over to Katie. Over to you.
Great, thanks Anna, and thanks to our presenters for laying a really strong foundation for this dialogue that we're about to open up to the participants. So if Anna, you can just flip to the next slide so we can see the instructions for Zoom. I know we had a bit of an introduction to Mural at the beginning, but if you open the link that you'll see in the chat box, we will provide a bit more information so we can get the targeted responses from you that we're looking for. So first is Mural is a giant worksheet that allows everyone to participate and to contribute at the exact same time. As of right now, I think there's about 100 participants in the chat, which is quite a few people. And this will allow us to kind of gather your inputs with the remaining time left in the webinar. So you'll see it is very big and hard to read the post-its from your initial view. So if you go to the bottom right corner of your screen, you'll see the Zoom settings. You can change your navigation settings based on the trackpad or the mouse, whichever way you use to navigate around your screen. And you can zoom in and out to read the post-its that have already started to become filled in, which is great to see. So zoom in and zoom out, get a feel for the mural overall. You'll see there's two parts that we're looking to gather your input for. And the next slide, you can see about post-its and sticky notes. So the sticky notes are already there. If you would like to add more, you can by just double-clicking anywhere on the mural and a note will pop up. Please try to keep them in the same box that they're in right now. Stick to the themes, the 3 barriers that we're trying to address. But we wanted to get your input on the mural, and I will just share my screen right now to show you what we are looking for on the mural. Okay, so you should be able to see the mural here. You can see there are two parts. There's a first part where we really want to gather your inputs on ways to overcome the barriers based on the discussion and the feedback that we've had from our presenters. And we want to hear from you on the ground and what you're experiencing there and your great ideas. Hopefully the presentations have inspired you a bit. I know they inspired me. And in the second part, we're looking for examples of innovative or catalytic interventions to upscale EbA. So maybe, for example, you did some forest landscape restoration, but you changed one component of it to make it very successful, more successful than any other FLR project. What was that? So we would like to gather a bit of a case study from you on what country, what organization, who was involved, what did you do, what ecosystems did you work in? And all of these inputs will feed, as Nora and Anna have both mentioned, they'll feed the future of the Global EbA Fund, and they'll also feature an analysis paper. So we're really looking to gather as much from you guys as possible. So we will let you get started there. Please feel free to add your inputs, add any ideas you have. If you feel like you are very confident on finance and not so confident on policy and regulatory environments, please feel free to add 2 post-its on finance if you have 2 ideas. In addition, if you have an idea, but you feel so you see that someone's already written it, feel free to write it again. We'll be organizing them based on themes to try to get the main messages. So if there are a lot of similar ideas, they'll all be grouped together. So don't worry about duplicating too much. If you have problems with the mural, please let us know in the chat. If you're not able to access the mural, if you have an idea you really want to share, please feel free to share it in the chat. If you can't, put it in the mural and our team will let us know. Uh-oh. Seems that I was just cut off. Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you, Katie.
Okay, my Teams just told me I had a problem, but I'm glad I don't. So I see some ideas are filling up in the awareness and knowledge, which is good to hear, good to see. Feel free, you don't have to work in a left to right format. You can go on part 2 first or part 1, anything you'd like. So as those are filling up, I just thought we could answer some of the questions from the chat. I think there was a question that hasn't been addressed yet that was addressed to Salim. Salim, are you here with us? Salim, are you here? Maybe he's not with us right now. Maybe he stepped out of the room. What about Sunita?
Yes, I'm here, Catherine.
Okay, there was another question about how important is the ecological economics approach in EbA or nature-based solutions?
Yeah, can I respond now?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So thank you, Catherine, and thank you also to Dasar. I saw that question and really liked it. So my response to this question would be, as we already know, the ecological economics is a transdisciplinary field which not only focuses on economics, but also it focuses on our social system and integrated and also our ecological system. So there are 3 main dimensions in this ecological economics. So if you see my first and second slides, which are focusing on the the transdisciplinarity, the multidisciplinarity, I think ecological economics is one of the way that we need to include this. And also in the creating the evidence base, whenever we talk to policymakers, they often ask us what are the benefits, what are the costs, and we also need to focus on the cost benefit or analysis of not applying EbA. We only focus on what would be the benefits after the EbA, but also we need to focus on what would be the cost, what would be the benefits if we do not apply certain EbA or certain NBS which are focused on nature. So that will really help to create awareness. And all these different kind of studies really fall down under ecological economics, and it is one of the major field, I would say, for EbA. Thank you. Back to you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're right. We do have to consider what are the costs if we don't do this. That's a really strong point and something we can definitely consider moving forward. Okay, I see there are some great responses coming in here. There seems to be a lot of ideas on awareness and knowledge, understanding ecosystem services. We see ideas about training local communities to be gardeners and foresters. I think this really ties in with Salim's idea of community-based adaptation and ecosystem-based adaptation kind of coming together. So that's a great point. Using local language. So again, tying into this idea of finding the right people, but also communicating to the right people and training your, targeting your trainings to the audience that you have, which Salim also brought up, which is an excellent point. I know we're a bit short on time, so I don't think we'll be able to read through all of these. But I would like to welcome our presenters. If you see a particular post-it note that you'd like to reflect on, to please feel free to jump in or comment on them. I definitely do not have enough eyes to read all of these great ideas that are coming in, but I do see a lot in the knowledge about being multidisciplinary and really, connecting and work and breaking silos as well. And using existing associations. I like this one about, instead of creating a new network, using the networks that are already there and supporting them to conserve their nature and their ecosystems. What else do we have? Public awareness. Great, more public awareness here. So maybe we could put those two together. Lots of training. Yes, of course, these are huge great ideas that are important. We need to understand the value before we sell EbA to anyone. Just moving over to the policy section, see if we can zoom in here a bit. We see ideas about dialogue. So again, knowledge and communication. Barriers to budget, specifically in Thailand. I think that's something that maybe this commenter meant specifically in Thailand, but also applies elsewhere throughout the region. Ideas about incorporating local voices, right? So getting communities involved in local governance, but also national policy making and NAPs, NDCs, and national policies. Great point. And ideas about policy reforms. Again, making sure we include everyone from small scale to much larger scales. Focusing on large projects only. Very interesting idea. I'm not sure maybe what whoever wrote this was thinking. Maybe echoing Salim's idea of scaling up projects that we've already seen are effective. So taking pilot ideas and scaling them up into larger projects, perhaps. I'm not really sure. If you've written that, feel free to expand upon it in the chat. I see some more down here. Including Indigenous people, yes. So this was another idea, another barrier that we had identified, particularly in the knowledge one, but it also applies to policy. I think as we'll see through these ideas that come in and these suggestions, that they're all very interconnected. So something that fits in the policy section might also carry over into the knowledge barrier, right? We need to build knowledge in order to build effective policies and to get support behind them. Absolutely. Lots of great ideas coming in here and many more coming in. I'm afraid I won't have enough time to read through all of them. And here we are in the finance session, discussing green infrastructure. I think the fund that Suzanne raised awareness of was incredible to hear about, and we do in fact need a lot more green infrastructure. Especially Suzanne, the point that you made about we have public funds available, we're just not using them as wisely or as effectively as we could for ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solutions, I think was an excellent point. We always talk about needing more funds, but maybe we just need to use the ones that we have in a more effective way. Another comment about private sector, right? Of course, we have public funds, we have private funds, and there is always this ongoing need to engage the private sector in this. 2 on the private sector, we can move those near each other here. Demonstrating a return on investment. Of course, this is a main point that's been brought up in discussing EbA and monitoring and evaluation of them. How effective was it? What did the donors get out of it, or what did the community get out of it? And was it worth the money that was invested in it? And exploring payment for ecosystem services, which I think answers someone else's question, the question that was directed to Salim about how can communities directly benefit from EbA. So I think that's a great example, payment for ecosystem services in terms of watershed restoration and other activities that communities can do to support the ecosystems that they live in. Oh, I'm afraid we're running out of time. Just to have a quick look at some of the innovative and catalytic interventions that have been mentioned. Oh, there it is, right there. So here's a perfect example of payment for ecosystem services in Bhutan when the communities restored their watershed. So that's a perfect example of ways that communities benefit from this, but also the private sector benefits from community involvement. Excellent. It's like I put that there myself. I see another one here, more specific to Thailand, about the Thai-German climate program. Excellent. Working really hard with community river basin associations and working with them to understand EbA. Excellent example of how we can break those barriers and also build knowledge and direct our funding towards EbA. Pakistan, another exceptional example of the billion tree tsunami on forest landscape. I think that was quite an incredible pledge and a perfect example of what we can do when we have the right government support behind EbA. And another one in the Mekong Delta. Again, a system that needs a lot of ecosystem-based adaptation because, like Salim said, time is of the essence here. And in Mekong Delta, you can really see this with the rising sea level and saline intrusion issues. So I see there are still people writing. I am afraid we are running out of time, so I would encourage you to continue writing and sharing your ideas. The mural will be open after the webinar, but unfortunately we're just running out of time to highlight all of these excellent ideas, but I'm very happy to see almost all of the post-its have been filled, and I hope that you can continue to add these. So with that, I will hand it over to Raphael Glemet, my colleague at IUCN, for a bit of a wrap up of the webinar. Over to you, Raf.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you for this great facilitation of what is a relatively short exercise and will require more time. But as you said, this wall is open and hopefully participants can provide their input way beyond this event particularly. So I believe we're very short on time. It's already time to close. So I just wanted to provide a few key information which I think are very relevant for all of you who are planning to submit proposals for this EbA Global EbA Fund. So I think we understand even more now after this event the different components around ecosystem-based adaptation and really this idea of core benefits. Ecosystem-based adaptation is not only using nature to adapt or to mitigate when we talk about ecosystem-based mitigation, but it's really about core benefits, human benefits, and also biodiversity benefits. So it's really restoring, managing, conserving, and protecting nature and biodiversity sorry, to adapt and to also enhance biodiversity benefits. This dimension on biodiversity benefits is often forgotten in the project, and allow me to emphasize on that. I think it's a very important dimension of EbA. So this fund has been supported and is supported by BMUIKI, 20 million euros. And what I really like about it is its flexibility. So we used a lot this word catalytic and innovative. It's really the idea of upscaling EbA and not continuing the small pilots as useful as they are, but really moving to scale. So we understand that we can do that through building awareness and understanding. There's a lack of awareness that was highlighted by a number of participants. Reaching out to new government agencies, Ministry of Finance, we heard, the Prime Minister office, so seeing big and really influencing high-level processes. It's also about addressing planning and other governance issues, and also providing solution to financing gaps. So this system is not a standalone fund. It's really building on existing opportunities, existing plannings, and existing projects. So see that as a way to really catalyze existing processes that you are in charge of or that you are working with. So this process is also not only about funding or small grants or large grants or medium grants. Is really about building a community of practice. We understood that after this event, we'll be working on an analytic paper that will be published at the beginning of next year, a series of regional dialogue. We just had now the Asia Pacific one, but we'll have also a number of others, and also several surveys online on really understanding how to overcome barriers. So you just provided some of the inputs, but please continue with that. So in terms of submitting your proposal, so you have now a deadline for this round, which is the 15th September of 2021 for the concept notes, with the decision in November 2021. And then the successful concept note will be invited to submit a full proposal. The grant will range from 50,000 to 250,000 for a maximum duration of 36 months. And really, again, this idea of bringing complementarity, building on existing processes, networks, and planning. So with this, I would like to thank you all for attending this event, and really please continue providing your inputs on the wall. Reach out to all of us. I believe our emails are accessible and will be shared. You will receive the slides and also the recording of the events for further information. And we hope that this is initiating a dialogue. So again, beyond just the granting process, but really a community of practice. So thank you all, and hope to see you very soon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining, and
bye-bye.
We wish you a nice day.
Right, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.